all of video gaming history, there are games that started out as arcade games and then were soon ported to consoles. And one such game was both a massive hit in sales and a critical failure at the same time. That game being Pac Man for the Atari 2600. Pac Man was first ported to the Atari 2600 in 1982 under the Namco license and was programmed by Todd Fry. And even though it stands as one of the best-selling games of all time, selling more than 7 million copies at the time, it still was a massive failure with critics, who ripped it to shreds, stating the poor graphics and sounds of the game made it far from the original arcade version as possible, thus putting it on the list of worst games of all time, and also one of the worst ports of all time as well. The arcade version of the game was such a massive hit all over that Atari decided to license it and produce it for the Atari 2600, so programming fell to Todd Fry to create the port. He wasn't even given any arcade specifications to work from, so he ended up playing the game and then spent 6 months developing it and putting it on the Atari's 4K ROM cartridge. To deal with Atari's limitations, Fry decided to make the maze more simplified and repetitive, and to change the dots from the arcade original to the wafer-looking thing sharing the wall colors of the 2600. The premise of the game is basically the same as the arcade original. You play Pac Man and have to gobble up all the dots, or in the case of the Atari port, wall-colored wafers, all the while avoiding the ghosts who are out to get you. However, there are some key differences between the arcade version and the Atari version, one being the way the game was designed. The original was designed in portrait mode, whereas the port was in landscape mode, thus making the wraparound tunnel on the top or rather on the sides like in the original. The design of Pac Man himself was different as well. Atari gave him an eye and only allowed him to face left or right, never up and down. The ghost's eyes moved in 4 directions rather than facing the direction of travel. The bonus fruit was replaced with a nondescript single-digit vitamin, and the final major change from the original was the sound. The familiar Waka Waka sound heard when Pac Man eats a dot was replaced with a clank and beep sound, as well as replacing the familiar 4-tone melody at the startup as well. Atari had 3 to 4 million pre-orders in 1981 of the 2600 version of Pac Man, and later it was noted to be one of the best-selling home video games in 1982, thus surpassing Space Invaders. However, on May 11, 1982, the game got its first negative review in Electronic Gaming Monthly, which was the magazine's first actual negative Atari game review, stating, "Considering the anticipation and considerable time the Atari designers had to work on it, it's astonishing to see a home version of a classic arcade contest so devoid of what gave the original its charm." And then in 1998, Next Gen magazine called it the worst coin-op conversion of all time. The game was one of the reasons for consumers' loss of confidence in the video game industry at the time, and also since been the blame for the infamous 80s video game crash. However, to try to bounce back from it, Atari then re-released the game for the 5200 with graphics that looked better and more true to the original, and became one of the 52's launch titles, and then adding 2 sequels as well with Miss Pac-Man and Pac-Man Jr. Here's my final thought, yet another ambitious undertaking by Atari, just like E.T. This one I also can't blame on the creator, since Fry had to deal with limitations and also had nothing to work off of except playing the arcade game. Atari Pac Man is a game at best and a total flop at worst. My best way to sum all that is set up, Atari Pac Man is the best-selling flop of all time. If you remember playing this game in the arcade, or if you played the Atari version, let me know in the comments down below. I'm Paul saying peace out, stay frosty, and a Pac Man fever.